Thank you very much for watching. Do join us again next time. Meanwhile, I'm off to see if the other half of my dream came true. Michael Portillo in my dressing room, sitting naked on a case of Merlot, challenging me to wrestle him off. Goodbye. Connection is, these are tall ships. That's Tan, the brilliant Kirsty Young. Tall, tan, young and lovely. I was tempted to immediately accept George Clooney as something lovely, but I need a little bit more of a gloss.
I'm ashamed now, actually, of that one. Never mind.
You know, in my mind, it was Michael Portillo. In the mind of the question setters, that book, The Lovely Bones. Some houses blues, delta blues. Then it's gamma correction. Then, as I heard you mutter, Barbara, beta blockers. So something with alpha, for example, in-house testing stage, alpha testing. Could have had an alpha male, of course, for example, Michael Portillo. That's always a good example, Michael Portillo. What an alpha male. Did you ever see that travel show where he went to a sauna and got sort of hit with twigs? Gripping viewing. Gripping. Where was I? Alpha. Something with alpha. Thank you very much for watching. We're going off to the green room now to relax and enjoy an even bigger cake with 148 on it. Of course, that's 200 in base 12. But the production manager assures me Michael Portillo will not be jumping out of it. I can only hope that means he's been sedated. Goodbye. And before we go, there's something I'd like to say. Ever since we moved here from the rarefied world of BBC4, every week during the show, people write to me on Twitter to ask what I'm wearing. Now, I don't want to be all knee-jerk, offended and political, but I ask you, would you write to This Week and ask what Michael Portillo is wearing? I know I have. In fact, I've written to offer to collect anything that Michael Portillo has worn. For charity. And the day that he replies, so will I. Goodbye. Thank you for watching. And coming up next on BBC Two, in a change to the published schedule, it's Michael Portillo's new cookery show, in which this week he tries his hand at patisserie. Yum, yum. That's Michael's Sticky Buns, next on BBC Two. And coming up next on BBC Two, in a change to the published schedule, is episode 3 of Michael Portillo's Natural History series, in which this week he's casting his inimitable eye over quadrupeds. That's Michael Portillo on all fours, next on BBC Two. And coming up next on BBC Two, in a change to the published schedule, it's another of those comic relief shows where people make flags for well-known celebrities. Tonight, a team of sailors make a pirate flag for a much-loved ex-cabinet minister. That's A Jolly Roger for Michael Portillo, next on BBC Two. Thanks for watching. And coming up next on BBC Two, in a change to the published schedule, it's another of Michael Portillo's chat shows, in which every week tables are turned on the great traveller as he interviews a famous British expat who's visiting from abroad. This week, Ben Elton's here from his home in Australia. That's Michael Portillo Bends Over, next on BBC Two. Thanks very much for watching. And coming up next on BBC Two, in a change to the published schedule, in another of his wonderful travel shows, Michael Portillo ascends the Peshawari hills that gave their name to a celebrated Asian trade route. As always, with his own personal spin, really making the land his own. That's Up Michael's Khyber, next on BBC Two. Thanks very much for watching. And coming up next on BBC Two, in a change to the published schedule, it's a celebration of Michael Portillo's 10 years in television, with a package of highlights from some of his greatest programmes, which, with his characteristic modesty, have remained unrepeated and largely forgotten until now. That's Michael Portillo, his best bits uncovered, next on BBC Two. And coming up next on BBC Two, it's a medical documentary in which the fantastic Michael Portillo takes a look at the latest advances in ocular surgery, talking to people whose lives have been transformed. That's Michael Portillo, You Can See Everything, next on BBC Two. Coming up next on BBC Two, in a change to the published schedule, it's another of those post-Brexit programmes where a popular celebrity has to launch their own business with the help of a supportive European. Well, tonight it's the turn of everyone's favourite former cabinet minister, alongside a softly spoken German. That's Michael Portillo's firm and gentle hands, next on BBC Two. Coming up next on BBC Two, in a change to the published schedule, it's another of those lovely treasure hunts where well-known BBC faces bury gold that members of the public have to find. Tonight, is it hidden among the flowers on Michael Portillo's allotment? The contestants try to find out. That's Rummaging in Michael's Bloomers, next on BBC Two. And coming up next on BBC Two, it's a crackerjack-style game show for adults in which Michael Portillo has to grab as much beer as he can off a conveyor belt. But we've made that beer very difficult to grab. That's Oiling Michael's six-pack next on BBC Two. And coming up next on BBC Two, it's a historical documentary in which Michael Portillo looks at the liberation of Saigon in 1975, tracing the incredible helicopter evacuation. That's Michael Portillo's Choppers Out, next on BBC Two. Thank you for watching. And coming up next on BBC Two, it's a new antiques programme. I know people say there are too many of those already, but this is a really exciting new format in which the always wonderful Michael Portillo, of whom long-term viewers know I am genuinely a big fan, drives around the country with several giant chests stuffed with artefacts that may be hugely valuable or, on closer inspection, totally worthless. Teams have 2 hours to work it out. That's taking a good long look inside Michael's trunks, next on BBC Two. Thank you for watching. And coming up next on BBC Two, Michael Portillo continues his series on developments in manufacturing since the Industrial Revolution. This week, looking at an innovation that transformed the mass production of jeans. That's Michael Portillo Stud Machine, next on BBC Two. And there's a treat coming up later on BBC Two. Following the success of Paul Whitehouse and Bob Mortimer's Gone Fishing, a new fishing series sees a much-loved former cabinet minister take up the ancient sport of angling. That's Michael Portillo Gets His Tackle Out on BBC Two. Coming up later on BBC Two, Michael Portillo brings us a new twist on the usual art format. Instead of painting pictures, contestants are competing to be the best curator. They must hang their own selection of famous artworks in a virtual gallery with that wonderful host on hand to encourage and congratulate them. That's Michael Portillo's Well Hung, later on BBC Two. And coming up later this evening on BBC Two, a new series, Michael Portillo's Home Decor, featuring that fantastic presenter who few people realise is a great aficionado of interior design. He'll be travelling the world selecting the finest antiques, wallpapers and soft furnishings for the nation to enjoy. And he truly is a connoisseur, so it is a wonderful opportunity for us all to really savour the exquisite taste of Michael Portillo. Later tonight. Thanks very much for watching. And coming up next on BBC Two, there's a change to the published schedule. The good news is it's Michael Portillo. Bad news is, unfortunately, Michael's been unable to make one of his wonderful travelogues this season due to travel restrictions. So instead, he's made a documentary about being stuck at home, unable to go anywhere. That's Spending Whole Weeks in Bed with Michael Portillo, next on BBC Two. Coming up later on BBC Two, Michael Portillo presents a documentary on illegal bird traffickers being stopped and made to face justice. It's only a half-hour show, but there is so much in there. That's Michael Portillo's jam-packed budgie smugglers brought down later tonight on BBC Two. And coming up later on BBC Two, it's the next instalment of Michael Portillo's Britain Through Its Confectionery. Michael continues his attempts to recreate retro sweets in his own kitchen. If you liked his nut clusters, you're going to love his curly whirly. We'll be seeing that later on BBC Two. And coming up next, it's a spin-off from Celebrity MasterChef, where last year's winner, one of my favourite TV presenters, is spicing up the familiar dish of lasagna by suggesting variations on the traditional bechamel sauce. So why not join Michael Portillo for something experimental between the sheets? Next on BBC Two. Coming up next, it's a new show in which the multi-talented Michael Portillo turns impressionist and is kicking off with a magnificent recreation of the Prime Minister. So we could all look forward to seeing Michael Portillo's Uncanny Johnson next on BBC Two. And coming up next, in a change to the published schedule, it's a chance to see BBC Two's History of Optometry, presented by one of the channel's biggest stars. It looks at the beginnings of the science in the 13th century, when the spectacle frames housing the glasses were often made from elm, oak or ash. That's Michael Portillo, I Would, next on BBC Two. Thank you for watching. Coming up next on BBC Two, it's another chance to see that brilliant documentary about the Royal Mail. Every year, thousands of letters are sent with only a partial address. And this brilliant programme looks at a crack team of postal detectives that piece together clues, trying to ensure the letters reach their destination anyway. Presented by a much-loved former cabinet minister, check out Michael Portillo, I Will Find Out Where You Live. Good night. Thank you for watching. Before we go, I just want to make a quick apology to the continuity announcers. Over the years, I have occasionally said at this point that the programme that's coming up next is actually something that I've made up, often starring Michael Portillo. And I bet that's really annoying, and I just want to say I'm sorry. Anyway, thanks for watching, and stay tuned for The Naked Snooker. Good night. And coming up after this, a magnificent TV first. Michael Portillo takes up the mantle from the late, great Clive James, looking at television from around the world, kicking off in tribute to that wonderful Antipodean critic with the small screen in Australia. Although at the risk of spoilers, I don't think Michael's found anything he wants to watch over there. That's Michael Portillo, Nothing on Down Under, next on BBC Two. Very much for watching. And coming up after this on BBC Two, an immersive documentary in which the always sensitive Michael Portillo takes a job as a student counsellor, making a particular effort to inquire about people's families. But not too much, or that would be intrusive. I'm certainly looking forward to a little bit of How's Your Father with Michael Portillo, next on BBC Two. Coming up after this on BBC Two, Michael Portillo continues his culinary journey around India, this week learning to eat in the traditional manner without cutlery. Sadly, I think he's struggling to get the hang of it. That's I Want a Spoon with Michael Portillo, next on BBC Two. And coming up next on BBC Two, in a change to the published schedule, we've got an educational film about the challenges of filling in the self-assessment tax return. It's presented by someone who should know. He's a former cabinet minister. Step by step, he'll take us through each of the 1,000 questions and explain how to respond. That's Michael Portillo ticking all the right boxes. And thank you for watching. Coming up next on BBC Two, in a change to the published schedule, it's actually the next instalment of Michael Portillo's latest series about alternative medical therapies. This week, Michael is trying a popular Asian suction technique that's said to help with everything from psoriasis to a bad back. But he won't use a practitioner, too intimate. Also, he's heard it's very painful, so he'll be proceeding with caution. That's Michael Portillo's cupping himself gently in a few moments on BBC Two. Thank you for watching. Coming up next on BBC Two, Michael Portillo continues his wonderful series on the wines of the world, always travelling to their place of origin for the tasting, even in midsummer when temperatures are at their highest. But this week, possibly partaking of a little too much Retsina. So, if you'd like to see Michael Portillo getting absolutely slathered in hot grease, it's coming up next on BBC Two. Coming up next, could you adopt an African elephant? A famously endangered species, one of BBC Two's top presenters looks at how we, the viewers, could help not just with financial sponsorship, but actually looking after one of these magnificent creatures. That's A Heavy Pet with Michael Portillo, next on BBC Two. Good night.